Alright guys, we did it. We made it through the terrible movie month that is January. This happens every single year. Studios just kind of put out projects that they have on the back burner, trying to recoup some sort of box office dollars, and that people kind of just forget these projects ever existed. And I have to say, this January I felt was a little bit more stronger than usual. I still don't think there are any movies in here that I really loved, but I definitely liked a few of them, but there are still some stinkers in here. So if you like these kind of monthly wrap-ups, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get started talking about all the new 9 January releases I saw, starting with the new killer doll movie, Megan. So this is a movie I wasn't really looking forward to all that much when it was announced, but actually after that first trailer came out, I was like, hold on, all right, this thing actually has its own personality. It looks fun enough. Yeah, it's PG-13, but it can be like a new horror icon for the TikTok generation, basically. And everybody knows, I really defend PG-13 horror movies if they're done correctly. I think that they can scare the crap out of you just as well, if not more, than an R-rated movie. So when I say this, just keep this in mind, but this movie really should not have been PG-13. Like, you can tell the filmmakers made this one with an R rating in mind, and then when they found out they were just going to cut it to PG-13 rating to get more butts in seats and get as much money off of it as possible, they just cut out all of the R-rated sequence. They didn't change them to make them interesting and still have that PG-13 rating. They just basically chopped everything out in post. Drag Me to Hell from Sam Raimi is always an example I use of a good PG-13 horror movie, and they clearly had that rating in mind when making the movie, so they got all the gore and violence in there in a really interesting manner that still fit into that rating, but could still be creepy and scary. Don't get me wrong, there are parts of this movie that I definitely enjoyed, and it already got greenlit for a sequel, which didn't take long at all, and I think it already has a release date of January 2025, so this is not going anywhere as a franchise. I just really hope the next one's rated R. I don't think they're gonna make it R after the success of the PG-13 one, but I mean, a guy can dream, right? There are definitely things I enjoyed about this movie. I thought Megan herself as a character was really entertaining. I thought the two leads were really good too. The side actors, not so much. They didn't do much to progress the plot or really carry the movie. But I will say the first act of this thing is tough to get through. I mean, this movie without its title character, without Megan being introduced and really letting her run wild and do what she's supposed to do from seeing the trailer, I mean, this movie really suffered from that. This movie is just definitely a mixed bag for me. There are scenes in there that are funny and entertaining, and I really enjoy the character of Megan when she's on screen doing what we know she's supposed to be doing. But there are other parts of the film that really struggle when she's not on screen. It's a fun enough time at the movies. I'd rather stream it. It's kind of that quality of movie to me. But I'm going to put Megan as the fine category. It was a decent introduction into January 2023 movies. The next movie we're talking about is The Pale Blue Eye, that new mystery thriller with Christian Bale on Netflix, a sentence I didn't think that I would ever say in my entire life, but I guess, you know, that's 2023 for you. And does this movie break his recent streak of stinkers? I don't think that it does. It tries to, but I just don't think there's enough there to push it over the edge. This is definitely a movie I was excited for. I mean, Christian Bale's in it, come on. But outside of that, I really love mystery thrillers or just detective movies in general. Chinatown with Jack Nicholson's one of my favorite movies ever. I was kind of hoping it just had that kind of vibe mixed with this dreary 1800s West Point, New York atmosphere. I also read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe in college. I really enjoyed his stuff, but Scott Cooper is an interesting director. He's a guy that I like. I don't love his stuff. It seems like there's always something preventing me from really enjoying his films, and I just don't think he breaks that cycle here with The Pale Blue Eye. The first hour of this movie was really gripping. The story was great. The performances were spot on. The scenery here really set the mood. But after we get past the second act, I feel like there's just too many conveniences being taken. It just kind of brought me right out of the story. There was a little bit of overacting. It all just left a pretty bad taste in my mouth, especially with all the potential that this movie had. I feel like this movie just tries to over-explain what's going on to us at the conclusion way too much. It just doesn't work for me in this type of a mystery thriller. I've been comparing it a lot to like creature features in horror movies when there's like a monster or a beast roaming around. A lot of the times it's more effective if we don't see it in the light and the less we know about this thing. When you start showing a xenomorph in the sunshine prancing around, it becomes a lot less scary and intriguing. But like I said, there's a lot of good stuff here, which actually makes it a little bit more frustrating. But the performances by our two leads are pretty solid. The scenery is awesome. It really got me into that wintry vibe. And the crime in question had me intrigued, but I kind of just saw it all fall apart in this crazy conclusion that I just didn't really buy at the end of the day. So it's still got some positives. It definitely has its negatives, but it's still just going to go into the fine category for me. The wasted potential here is really a killer. The next movie we're talking about is Missing, and this is why I don't leave the house, because stuff like this could happen. But this is the new Screen Life mystery thriller from those guys that gave us Searching a couple years ago. I really enjoyed Searching. It surprised the hell out of me. I really think it deserves all the praise that it got, but that's what worried me about Missing. I was like, do we really need this kind of sequel, kind of not, to Searching? Like, is it really deserving of another movie? Is that style of filmmaking gonna get stale? And I'm happy to say, I think it kind of does what it sets out to do. It's a gripping little mystery thriller that I had fun with, and I'm still somehow not sick of this whole Screen Life type of filmmaking. I'm sure you'll find some plot holes in this one while you're watching it. That's kind of just part of the territory because they're throwing a lot at you and they're trying to set up a lot of different twists, a lot of them that I actually thought worked. And this kind of style of filmmaking, I do think has almost zero watchability for me just because it's kind of a gimmick. It's very acquired taste, if you will. Like Searching, I thought was an awesome movie, was a better movie than Missing, and I still haven't rewatched that one, so that should tell you everything you need to know there. But I thought this one was a very solid time at the movies. I'm glad I got to experience this one with a big audience because everyone was gasping and laughing at every twist and turn. It was very effective, the performances are good, and it was just overall a creative movie, and I'm glad to see how they built on this from Searching. They didn't just copy that movie, they delivered up a completely new, unique experience that I think totally stands alone. But like I said, will I ever want to watch this one again? Probably not. That doesn't take away from what it accomplished, but just the way that it's filmed, I don't see myself ever wanting to delve into this mystery again. But that being said, it was a positive experience, and I think it was my first positive experience at the movies in 2023, so I'm giving Missing the first good rating on this list. The next movie we're talking about is Sick, and this is the newest slasher from Kevin Williamson. If you don't know him, he's a screenwriter that's very famous for writing good slasher movies. He wrote the first couple Scream movies. He wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer. He wrote The Faculty. The Faculty is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think it's super underrated. Great 90s horror if you're looking for that, and I highly suggest it. But Sick is a slasher that deals with the pandemic era. And before you start rolling your eyes, because I know I did when I heard this was coming out, this, I think, is one of the only movies that's tolerable about that subject and actually utilizes it to effective degrees. Like 80% of this movie could happen regardless, in any time period. You know, these people do have to quarantine and more stuff about the pandemic comes out as the movie unfurls. But at the end of the day, it just kind of ends up being the classic trope of people, you know, being off at a lake house by themselves and there's someone there watching them that they're not expecting. So it hits all the normal beats, but it definitely has this little 2022, 2023 spin to it that I definitely enjoyed. Will it be for everyone? Probably not, but I do think you'll enjoy it if you like Kevin Williamson movies to begin with all of those kind of meta slasher films. And, I mean, we know his trademarks. There's a killer chase scene in here. It's actually a very long chase scene, and it got my adrenaline pumping. I definitely enjoyed watching this movie. I thought it was a pretty decent thrill ride. Like, it's not a top-tier blockbuster. You can tell that it definitely didn't have that much of a budget behind it, but for what they did, I thought it was a pretty effective little journey into this little newfound slasher. The ending and the motivation for the killer will work for some and definitely not work for others. It worked for me, which is why I'm singing its praises right now. I definitely see its flaws, and I can understand why some people don't like it, but for me, I really enjoyed Sick. I thought it was a tight, fun little slasher. I'm putting that in the good category for January. All right, so the next movie we're talking about is Skinamarink. If you saw my review for this one a couple weeks ago, you know I had some very choice words for it, I'll put it that way. But basically, to sum up the situation for you here, this movie was going crazy, spreading like wildfire all over TikTok, with everyone saying that it was the scariest movie they've ever seen in their entire life. And I feel like a movie gets labeled that way. A new scary movie is the scariest movie ever, like once a year at this point. But if you believe everything you see on TikTok, then I've got a bridge to sell you, because this one... woo! So if you haven't heard about this one was kind of a film festival sensation. People were really applauding it when it went to a couple different festivals in the last year. The thing was made for $15,000, and I mean, the director is a YouTuber that analyzes people's nightmares. All of that sounds really cool, and he made this short film called Heck that I guess he expanded into a long film to make Skinamarink. It should have just stayed a short film, if you ask me. But before I really dive into this, I have to applaud any time a director takes a big creative swing at the fences here. I mean, This guy made this movie with no budget, basically. It made some serious waves at festivals, so no matter what I have to say about it, that is a monumental success, and my hat is off to the director. I really love what he's doing here, and I really appreciate the creative take that he tried with this new kind of analog found footage entry into the horror genre. But it just did not work for me. If you haven't heard about this one, it's basically about two young children that wake up in the middle of the night, their parents are gone for some reason, and the doors and windows in their house are disappearing. So they're kind of stuck in this dark, nightmarish environment with only the TV and cartoons playing to kind of keep them safe, keep these rooms lit. And like I said, it's supposed to mimic childhood nightmares and trauma that people have actually experienced in the past. But it's really just an hour and 40 minutes of unfocused shots that are all grainy, looking at the ceiling, looking at the floor. You never see a character or actor clearly. You just really don't know what you're looking at. And a lot of the times, it's setting you up for a big scare. And there's actually some pretty effective tension being built. And then right when it's supposed to reveal something, maybe someone just screams or a light just goes on somewhere to take your attention somewhere else. And then we're on to the next sequence that's going to take half an hour of grainy footage. It wasn't a pattern that I could get behind. At the end of the day, what I think it really comes down to is that I didn't have these types of nightmares as a kid. If I did, I would probably connect with it way more. But my nightmares as a kid was me like walking into school in my underwear or falling off a cliff forever until I wake up. Not me just hanging out in a dark room with TV static for an hour and a half. This is probably the most divisive and experimental horror experience you'll be able to get in 2023, and I definitely appreciate that. Like I said, I'm a massive horror fan. I don't know if this more experimental and atmospheric stuff is for me. I'm starting to think maybe this part of the subgenre just isn't really my cup of tea. But like I said, it has its merits, and I think you should check it out for yourself. But that being said, Skinamarink is the first one going in the bad category for me. The next movie we're talking about is Plane, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was at an early screening for The Menu with my buddy last year, and a trailer started playing that kind of showed this intense little action thriller. Didn't look like anything groundbreaking, but it had Gerard Butler, it had Mike Coulter, and my buddy leaned over, he was like, "Have you heard anything about this movie?" I'm like, "No, I actually don't know about this one at all." My theater erupted when that title got revealed to just be Plane. I mean, we were hooting and hollering in the theater. I was cracking up. I mean, I don't know how it was called that. I heard in other countries it's called Mayday. I think that is a way better title, but Gerard Butler actually fought to keep it called Plane. I mean, if you want to die on that hill, that's fine. More respect to you, but I just don't know if that was the right decision. But I can tell you what the right decision was, and that was seeing Plane in a theater with a packed crowd. I mean, I was going into this one really expecting a dumpster fire. I enjoy Gerard Butler in some of his movies. I really liked Den of Thieves. I liked Cop Shop from last year. Obviously, those Olympus movies I thought are just like fun action pulp. Plane might be the first legitimate surprise of 2023. There are better movies on this list in January already, but this one was just a surprise. I really didn't think it was going to be good, and it ended up kind of hitting the mark for me in a lot of ways. More important than anything else is that this movie knows exactly what it is. It's not trying to be anything that it's not. It's just a very simple, almost 90s style action movie. It's like barely over an hour and a half, get in, get out, doesn't overstay its welcome. I mean, it does a lot of that stuff correctly. And one thing that I really enjoyed about this movie that I feel like a lot of current action films get wrong is that they didn't turn the main character into an absolute martial arts badass. Like, this guy's a pilot. He's not Bruce Lee. So Gerard Butler, when he gets into hand-to-hand combat, rightfully so, gets his shit kicked in a lot, and like, it kind of adds to the whole intensity of the scene because he's fighting for his life out here, and he doesn't really have that much of a chance at winning, so he has to get super scrappy, and I really like that they did that. But if you're more into those kind of modern action movies where the guy is an unkillable badass, that's why they give you the Mike Coulter character here. He's the trained Army veteran. He knows all the skills. He knows how to shoot a gun. Like, that guy is a force to be reckoned with. I feel like they just played off each other really well, and like, this is just a popcorn movie through and through. Like I said, it's not trying to be anything else. Like, this is the action movie I bet a year from now you're going to be seeing played on TNT non-stop. And I don't know if I'm ever going to actively seek out watching this movie again, but this one really is that kind of perfect cable TV type of movie. If it was on TNT while I was flicking through the channels, I might stop and watch it for like half an hour just to kind of have a nice little ride and a little action romp. Now, I might sound like I'm seriously singing this one's praises, and I am a little bit, because it was just a surprise, because I was really not expecting anything nearly as polished or entertaining as this was. it still has tons of flaws. It doesn't really stand out in the action genre. And like I said, I'm probably never going to watch it again. So Plane, even though it was a nice little surprise, I'm going to be putting that into the fine category for 2023. But it's a good fine. Next up is Zheng-Yi. This is the new action sci-fi movie on Netflix from the guy that gave us Train to Busan, and I love Train to Busan. You'd think Netflix would actually want to let us know this is coming out when it has that caliber of a director behind it, but I feel like not a lot of people actually knew this one was releasing. But I definitely enjoyed this movie. It seems like I actually enjoyed it more than most, so let's get into this one. If you haven't heard about this one is set in the 22nd century. Earth is pretty much uninhabitable by now because of the climate change, so there's a bunch of like off-planet man-made structures where everybody lives, but there's a massive civil war going on for the last 40 years between a bunch of them. So basically, there used to be this awesome badass soldier that had a chance at ending all of that, but she died in combat, unfortunately. So now what they want to do is they want to take her brain, put it into a Terminator body, and just have this unbelievable AI soldier just go out and win the war for them. Now, when you start watching this, you might start thinking, like I did, that this is kind of just like a futuristic world, better CGI version of RoboCop. And it is kind of that, but I also got other hints of like Blade Runner, Elysium, and Altered Carbon in there too, mostly just because of the world building, and once you see this movie, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about there. I don't think anything was deliberately copied in this movie. It made it its own, it just made me think of those other films and shows. And even if you did think that it kind of copied it, I feel like it really worked well in this world to create a nice spectacle. It seemed lived in, so who cares? What really sets this movie apart, though, is the emotional relationship between our two leads. We find out that the lead character, who's this scientist working on this AI soldier program, is actually the daughter of the fallen badass soldier. So she definitely has a better connection and personal stake to this program's success. And I mean, she really just wants this thing to work. This is her fallen mother's AI clone we're talking about here. So it was probably pretty weird working on it, but it also must be pretty cool if it's a success. Now, it's been a theme in Hollywood for a bunch of years now about being afraid of AI, us giving AI too much power. It's going to turn back on us and obviously, I don't know, enslave the whole human race. That's what's cool about this movie, is that it kind of flips that on its head. It's much more about what happens when humans take advantage of AI and just don't really care about its well-being. Like, you made this thing, you decided what features to give it, so if you want it to be super lifelike and be indistinguishable from a human, but also just do your bidding whenever you want it to, I just don't know if you can have it both ways there. I feel like this movie suffers in the second act a little bit. We don't really see the AI soldier that much at all, and we have to kind of figure out for ourselves, okay, it's the scientist here that's actually going to be the main character. That could have been reworked better to give a tighter experience overall, but that third act sold me on this movie. I mean, this movie's the definition of it's not how you start that people will remember, it's how you finish, because the third act had a lot of action, it was super emotional, it kind of just tied the whole thing together for me, and I ended up really enjoying it. You know, this movie might not be the next big budding sci-fi action franchise, but I feel like it's a worthy entry for people that like 90s sci-fi films like RoboCop or Total Recall. I feel like you'll be right at home in this movie. The CGI was pretty up to snuff. I thought the visuals overall were pretty solid. The action sequences I thought were pretty engaging. I found it getting pretty intense by the end of this movie, but it's the performances here that hold this whole thing together. And like I said, the conclusion came together pretty well for me, better than I was expecting it to after seeing the second act. I'm putting Zheng-Yi in the good category here. So the next movie we're talking about here is the new action rom-com Shotgun Wedding, and if you can believe it, and I looked this up so I know it's true, this is the 10th time that Jennifer Lopez is playing a bride in a movie. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, all right, 10th time must be a charm, right? I hate to tell you that that is wrong. So I have to say this one did have a pretty intriguing and funny trailer. I mean, it's set up to look like just a destination wedding movie that we've seen a million times before, especially with Jennifer Lopez. And then halfway through, it just kind of turns into like Die Hard, but at a destination wedding. And I really wasn't expecting that. But I was like, okay, is this just going to be a gimmick? Like, the trailer was enjoyable enough, but I think it showed the most enjoyable parts and that it can't really last as a full movie gimmick. And I think that that ended up being the case. Not only that, but I feel like this is one of those movies where the title was figured out first. Like, the writer's room ended and they were like, yeah, script, character development, dialogue, we'll worry about all that later. Shotgun Wedding, now that's a winner of a title, but unfortunately, you need way more than just some snappy title to actually stand out in this game. And I feel like that really shows, because one of the biggest detractors of this movie is the tired and lazy script. Like, was there decent writing and funny jokes in there? Yes, but as I was watching the movie, I was like, okay, all these jokes are from other funnier comedies. Like, I was sitting there being like, okay, that was from Deadpool, that was from I Love You Man, oh, that was from Johnny English. So it was like, there's funny lines in here, but it really wasn't first popularized with this movie. It was from another funnier comedy. And because of that, I just can't really give this movie that many props. Like, I didn't think the leads really had too much charisma or chemistry. It kind of just ripped off that movie, The Lost City, with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum, if you've seen that. And even that is kind of a ripoff of Romancing the Stone. So you get what I'm saying here. Like, Shotgun Wedding is already a copy of a copy right out of the gate from its inception. I will say, though, and this should surprise absolutely nobody, that Jennifer Coolidge is by far the best part of this movie. And after her stint on The White Lotus, I feel like me and everybody else just cannot get enough of her. So if it took this movie for me to see her wielding a machine gun, that's fine, so be it. But everything else in this movie is just really nothing to write home about. I feel like comedies just have been on a very bad, stinky streak lately. Like, I was thinking to myself after I saw this movie, I was like, okay, the Nick Cage movie from last year, the Weird Al Yankovic movie from last year, and then Palm Springs a couple years ago, those are really the only comedies I can point to right off the bat without thinking too much about it that I thought were pretty funny from start to finish. So yeah, this one just came out as like a hollow, tired, lazy experience for me, if you can't already tell from the choice words I used to talk about it earlier. But I did not enjoy this movie. I'm never gonna watch it again. There's so many better comedies that do what this one tried to do in a much better stylized fashion. So yeah, unfortunately, Shotgun Wedding is standing alone here today, and it's not in a positive light. I'm going to be putting it in the awful category for January 2023. Saving the best for last year, because now we're talking about Infinity Pool. I mean, this is a wild ride of a movie. Like I said, I don't think there's any movies in January that I loved, but I still very much enjoyed this one. Brandon Cronenberg is a director that is high up on my watch list. I mean, I loved his movie Possessor that came out a couple years ago. I just thought it was so raw. He clearly took the best parts out of his father's directing style. It was gory. It was wild. It was just like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was a sci-fi romp that I'll never forget, and I always recommend it to people. So I was obviously very excited for Infinity Pool. I mean, come on, we're taking the mind of Brandon Cronenberg here, throwing in Alexander Skarsgård, throwing in Mia Goth, who's been on an insane hot streak herself, might I add, and throwing them into this like twisted nightmare scenario of a vacation, kind of mixed with White Lotus, with these kind of rich stereotypes and class system divides. And it is just a wild ride that you will not forget after the credits roll. The imagery in here is insane. It's super entertaining. I thought our two leads did a really good job. I feel like it might falter a little bit in the middle. It loses its way a little bit, maybe forgetting the message behind the film that it's trying to push, and maybe starts being a little bit crazy just for craziness' sake. That being said, I mean, it was still enjoyable. I just don't think it was as powerful or as twisted as I was expecting it to be after seeing Possessor. Brandon Cronenberg kind of seems like one of those directors that doesn't have to worry too much about studio intervention. It seems like both of his films have been with Neon and they're kind of just letting him do what he wants to do. Maybe he could benefit from being reined in a tiny bit when it comes into the messaging standpoint of the film. The visuals and the shock value and the performances let him do whatever he wants. But, you know, the message to be a little bit clearer might have benefited this film a little bit more. I still liked it, I just didn't love it. I loved Possessor, and I was hoping that Infinity Pool kind of lived up to that, because that one just really worked for me, the entire package from front to back. It doesn't as much, but Infinity Pool is definitely still a good movie. I have to mention, though, I am a little bit bummed that I saw it at theaters with the R-rated cut. Everyone at Sundance was ranting and raving that there was the NC-17 cut that they were being shown there at the festival. I have to say, though, after seeing this R cut, I can't imagine what was actually taken out of the film. There is some crazy imagery and stuff going on in this movie, but I mean, just being the horror freak that I am and really enjoying Brandon Cronenberg's movies, I have to check out that NC-17 cut when it eventually comes out. But overall, this is going to be a theater experience I'm not going to forget anytime soon. I highly suggest if you're interested in this type of movie, you should go check it out at the theater and support it. I mean, I don't know where else you're going to get an experience like this in 2023. I'm sure there will be others with this kind of crazy shock value and this twisted nightmare scenario, but they are few and far between, especially getting theater releases. But I really enjoyed Infinity Pool. I didn't love it, like I said, as I did Possessor, but Infinity Pool is promptly going into the good category for 2023. All right, so now with all the discussion and chit-chat out of the way about these movies, it's time to look at these really quick and just divvy them up into my final ranking list and see if the order looks good. So, starting from bottom to top, unfortunately, Shotgun Wedding has no way of getting out of the awful category. Skinamarink ain't moving from the bad category. So let's start looking at those fine movies. I think Plane's gonna go first. I mean, I enjoyed it, followed by The Pale Blue Eye. It's actually crazy to me that I'm putting a Gerard Butler movie named Plane above a Christian Bale movie, but I don't know. That third act really fell apart in front of my eyes for me. Megan, I wanted it to be more. I wish it was rated R, or at least that they made the movie with the PG-13 rating in mind, so it's going to stay there at the bottom for me. Going up to the good category, Infinity Pool is going to jump to the front of the list. I definitely enjoyed that one the most and feel like it had the most artistic merit. It was just a wild ride. Jung-E, I mean, surprising, but that third act really sold it for me. It really came together. Like I said, I thought the second act was a little shaky, kind of switched focus on the characters. We didn't really know who we were going to be following. But that third act really wrapped it up for me emotionally. The action was good and the performances really brought it home. Followed by Missing. I mean, Missing was a solid little mystery thriller with that screen lifestyle of filmmaking. And I'm not sick of it yet, somehow. I didn't think that Searching needed this kind of off sequel, whatever you want to call it, but it stands alone. It was a fun little thriller. It had its good twists, some of which I wasn't expecting. And then Sick. I was definitely surprised by Sick. I wasn't that impressed when it was first announced with this whole pandemic-themed slasher. I was just like, I don't know, this genre of film, I don't know if it's going to fit really into that premise, into the current events, but I shouldn't doubt Kevin Williamson. He's got a good track record with Scream. I told you I love The Faculty, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. So I think this is where my rankings are going to lie here, with Infinity Pool leading the charge. All right, that gets us to the end of the January monthly movie wrap-up and tier list. If you enjoy stuff like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'm definitely going to be making more videos like this in the future as the months come and go. And I feel like, with all things considered, for January, this was actually a decently strong outing. I mean, usually in this month, everything's ending up in like the bad or awful category, and there were some pretty good films this month. Infinity Pool, Sick, Jung-E, Missing. I enjoyed some of those, and I think you should go check them out. But yeah, that's it for me with this video. I've got the Knock at the Cabin review coming out later this week. I'm definitely excited for that. M. Night's a little shaky for me, but I'm definitely looking forward to this movie. And if that's not a movie that piques your interest and you don't think you're gonna go check it out, I'll see you at the next one of these in February. Take it easy.